Our sponsor today is AppWork. Best known for exceptional maintenance workflow management, AppWork offers so much more. Optimize operations with its advanced business intelligence that turns data into strategy. Simplify your operations with AppWork's intuitive platform. Service team members love the gamification of maintenance workflows and leaderboards, making everyday tasks a competition for number one. From project management to team communication, AppWork has you covered. Visit appworkco.com today.
Welcome to The Maintenance Mindset, an audio-video podcast brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network. I'm your host, Paul Rhodes, and over the more than 3 decades in the apartment industry, I've had roles that include being on-site, providing services as a vendor, creating and delivering multiple education programs, and active association work. This podcast is centered on the often overlooked role that our on-site maintenance workers play. You know, the men and women that respond in the middle of the night to the toilet call, or the after hours "it's really hot in my apartment" request, or my favorite, "my ring fell down the drain, get over here now." In other words, the often unsung heroes who are responsible for asset preservation and resident satisfaction. Working in multifamily maintenance provides interesting, sometimes amusing, and often fascinating stories and viewpoints. My encouragement to you is this: whatever you do it with a maintenance mindset. Hey there. This episode of The Maintenance Mindset, we're going to talk about a theme. You know, quite frequently we discuss thoughts, something that I have pondered or a survey or data has shown. This episode's a little bit different because it seems to be, to me, a lot of conversations that I'm having all revolve around this topic. Even the podcasts that are being produced right now, Rooms for Ronald, he's been talking about his sales experience that's been going on. Even in The Turnover, the podcast that I'm lucky enough to host with Mark Sharp and Chris Caramonica. A couple of weeks ago, by the time this aired, we did an episode on this very topic. It was reinforced, and really what brought it to the head was recently I got the opportunity to speak at VAMA, the Virginia Apartment Management Association conference, and a lot of the sessions talked about this very topic. Let me see if this quote from Charlotte Pashota will summarize it up. And if you haven't guessed what this particular topic is yet, maybe this will enlighten it. During Charlotte's session, she was talking about the importance of this very topic. And it's amazing because Charlotte is an experienced and award-winning leasing person. She is all about the office and the sales and working better in that world. And I'm honored enough to be able to call her friend. But the quote that she said really surprised me. I had never thought of it this way. Her quote was, "A 2% increase in your renewals is equivalent to a 10% savings of your budget." Yeah, I let that hang there intentionally. If you are expected to renew at 56%, which I believe, it's been a while since I looked at the numbers, but I believe that means you have a 46% annual leaving. If you're expected to renew at 54% and you raise that to renew at 56%, you have saved 10% of your budget. That's an astonishing amount of money. That is an amazing number and a wonderful way to think about it, especially because the very next topic that she brought up was that each apartment turn in total cost, and that's salary, vendors, maintenance, marketing, advertising, all of the embedded costs in filling a vacant unit with a resident is on average nationally $4,250. Now, the 2% increase in renewals equals 10% of your budget number makes more sense. And where that comes into play in my mind is customer service. It's in a lot of the conversations that I end up having. And it even, I was asked to go to VAMA to speak about being a maintenance supervisor and at the same time, how to troubleshoot problems. I got to speak at 2 sessions, and both of those sessions, when you're presenting, if you've ever had the opportunity to present to a large audience, you have your program, you have your outline and what you're going to cover. But oftentimes, based on the situation, where you're at, the type of conversations you're having, the questions that are asked in the group, your discussion takes on a different flavor, as it were. You still get the information. You still follow your outline with the desired outcomes. But every time as a presenter, I get the opportunity, or a trainer, I get the opportunity to train something, it's different, even though I'm covering the same thing. In this event, all of the sessions, from my perspective, flowed into that customer service question. And the reason why I bring up Charlotte's ever pertinent quote is that renewals, I believe, is a customer service thing. The reason why I say that is our residents, they moved in. They've lived at our property for a year. They know the building, they know the structure, they know the stove, the countertops, the ceilings, the walls, the building. That's not going to change. The only thing that changes is customer service. The only thing that colors that experience that our resident has of living there is customer service. And I bring this up because it's fascinating to me that every one of these topics of customer service, first in the sessions that I got to attend, they all used an example of good maintenance customer service, where a maintenance technician went in, solved a problem, and that solved the relationship. That made that customer experience all the better. And of course it would. I mean, don't get me wrong. It wasn't all just about maintenance. Of course, that's my interest. My ears always peak up when they discuss fixing things or repairing things or preventing problems. In this case, every single example, every single problem given had an example of maintenance attached to it. More than I ever remember hearing in all of the conferences I've done. See, yes, when I go to conferences, I attend sessions for something other than apartment maintenance, leasing, sales, HR, all of those other topics. They're fascinating because there's information there that can be gleaned. And I think that's the first piece that I do want to bring up to us as people with a maintenance mindset, is we have to look outside of our vocation for the information that we bring back and apply to our vocation. This was reinforced more and more by a quote I actually ended up reading during my session, which is focused on that very aspect. Meaning bringing information from another vocation into mine and applying it. During a session I talked about on being a maintenance supervisor and what that looks like, what that role is. We discussed the fact that a lot of times today as maintenance professionals, that becoming a maintenance supervisor is just one step on the rung. But for a lot of us, it's undefined. Meaning, and I used my personal experience when I started out in the industry and I got the opportunity to become a maintenance supervisor, it wasn't exactly because I knew all there was to know about supervising and then did the job. I kind of got the job because there was an opening, they were having a hard time fixing it, and I happened to be in the right place at the right time to where the regional leader looked and said, "Hey, Paul, you've been at this property for a while. I think you could do well as a maintenance supervisor with this smaller property. Would you like the job?" And my reply is, "Do I get more money?" And their reply was yes. And I said, "Okay, what do I need to do?" And the answer was, "You just keep doing the same thing that you've been doing and we'll pay you a little bit more, except you're going to do it over there. Oh yeah, and you do have somebody else that's reporting to you now. Call me if you have any questions." Now, that's very oversimplification of it, but that was the change for me when I made the step from being I guess what you would call in today's terms, a lead technician or an assistant maintenance supervisor. I can't even remember the title that I held at the time. But moving up that ladder, it really brought home to me this concept that we have to get better at customer service. And why this is poignant is because in order for us as an organization, us as an industry, as a matter of fact, to continue to grow, to justify keeping our residents so that we hit that additional 2% renewal, are we actually doing what we need to do? Now, why? Why do we need to do this? To get back to the book that I quoted, and I'm in the middle of reading it, so I haven't even finished it yet. But the book I'm reading is What Got You Here Won't Get You There by Marshall Goldsmith. And the reason why I say it's up to us to go outside our vocation and bring that information back is, you see, Mr. Goldsmith, he's a business coach for CEOs and CFOs and all the different acronyms. And I came across this quote that really made me stop in my tracks. And it talked about, from a contextual standpoint, he was discussing as we get farther in elevation regarding responsibility of our career. What he says really strikes a chord with me, especially what we're talking about today. And what he says is, the reason I devote so much energy to identifying interpersonal challenges in successful people is because the higher you go, the more your problems are behavioral. That actually made me stop, especially when right after, a very, very short period of time after I read that quote in a class, I attended Charlotte's session and we talked about the impact of increasing renewals by 2%. The reason why, when we think of a broad overview, and right now, if you're watching this on YouTube, you are watching it on a piece of technology. That technology that is being used, it's a tablet, it's a phone, it's a piece of technology. It is all of the way that we are continuing to gather our information. And that technology is continuing to expand. It's not stopping. My recent, where I talked about all the money that's going for apartment maintenance is headed towards technology, I still hold to that. Okay, maybe all is too broad a statement, but the overwhelming majority is coming into multifamily. It's going into the apps, the documentation, the organizational systems, which we need. I am not aware, and please, in the comments, wherever you're at, in the comments, send me a notice or notification to let me know if there is an organization that is focusing on teaching customer service skills to maintenance technicians in a direct, usable way. we are very, very focused on teaching our maintenance technicians trade skills. And we need to be. We need our technicians to be able to replace a faucet, fix an air conditioning system, use refrigerant appropriately, repair a washer and a dryer, fix locks and drywall repairs and various construction and handyman type duties. We need those tasks to be done. But it is absolutely horrifying to me to think that we are having a lot of money being invested in technology. And that technology is replacing human beings in the aspect of customer service. For years, a lot of the conversation surrounding customer service has been around how can we off-site our phone calls? How can we use or employ a chat bot? Leasing is now done AI. Oh, I know. Okay. Yes, it is being done to make it more efficient. And in a working, when it works, it does that. But customer service is more than just efficiency. Sometimes customer service is listening to a resident tell you about their granddaughter having a problem washing her hands, and that's why there is water underneath the sink. I remember going to an apartment and the resident called and complained and said their toilet paper had gotten ruined underneath the vanity sink. And I walked in, and sure enough, everything was out from the vanity sink in the bathroom. And I looked in there, and yes, it was full of that 4-letter M word that we're not allowed to say. I'll say it. It's a podcast. We can say it. It was full of mold. Well, those of you familiar with mold, whenever you look at mold, you think water, you think moisture, because you take away water, mold doesn't occur. So I begin investigating, and if you're underneath a vanity sink, the only water source you've got is all affiliated and associated with that sink itself, either the drain or the supply line. And I began looking around down there, and for the life of me, I could not make this leak. I filled up the sink all the way to the top, let the water go down the overflow, nothing. I messed with the clevis and the plunger in the back of the faucet, made it go up and down, nothing. I made the faucet go. I tried to force this to leak, filled it up, drained it several times. I even went after it with a plunger to try and force water to go through the drain line in order to cause water to come out. Nothing. I replaced the supply lines thinking maybe that's it. Nothing. I dried it up. I cleared out and did what I needed to do to take care of the mold underneath the sink and got it all ready and sealed up and had it set. And I had the resident and said, I think I've taken care of it. Give me a call, please, if something else happens. So the parting activity I asked for her to do is to leave it empty to make sure that everything dried and the sealant I had put down there dried and cured. And take a look after a couple of days and make sure that it is indeed dry and ready to put all of her things back. Well, she called me back the next afternoon and said, hey, there's water underneath here again. Well, I came and again, found nothing. I tried to do it. I turned around and asked this wonderful elderly lady, who has used the sink? And she says, oh, my granddaughter uses this sink. And I said, what does she do? Oh, she washes her hands. She makes a big old mess in here. I swear, I don't know what that child does. And she went on to tell me just this wonderful story about her granddaughter. Took probably 5-10 minutes for us to go through that. But I asked her, when your granddaughter's washing her hands, is she throwing water, or does water end up being thrown on top of the countertop? And her reply was, yeah, it does. That's when I pulled the faucet up and replaced the sealing caulking to the countertop surface. I replaced that, got it all set. It was sealed with original plumber's putty that had gone bad over the years. It vibrated or for whatever reason, there was a leak. It let water through, because when I replaced that with silicone caulking, put the new one down, tightened those wonderful nuts that are underneath the faucet there. And when that happened, no problems going further. That occurred because I had the ability, the practice, and the openness to ask my resident questions. In my mind, that's an example of customer service. And if all we're doing is focusing on the physical trade skills, yes, we need those physical trade skills. Again, I am not saying replacement of focus. I'm saying, and we also need to focus on people skills. Are we giving our maintenance technicians people skills? Now, not to just define and potentially complain, because I recognize sometimes I have a tendency to rant and go on, but let's take practice from previous episodes and be the solution that we want to see. So here we go. Couple of things. First two lessons that in the Paul Rhodes book of customer service, the skills that our maintenance technicians need. First, I call it the peephole test. On our properties, we have what we refer to as curb appeal. And curb appeal is not what the area of concrete in between the asphalt and the landscaping looks like, the curb. This is a generalized term for the appearance of items that you can see from the curb. And it is used to reinforce the need for our properties to look good from the instant our prospective residents come onto the property. What you can see from the curb before our residents even get out of their car. Well, that works for an entire community. I'm talking about the peephole view, because for our residents, what they see through that little itty bitty hole in their door when we knock on it, that's what for our residents is curb appeal towards our maintenance technicians. It was interesting at VAMA, I at the conference, and I can't remember the speaker. It was either Stephen Wunsch or possibly Victoria Cowart. We're talking about the new first impression, the amount of time that you have to make a first impression. And they said it used to be between 15 and 25 seconds. And due to TikTok, because of the scrolling and swiping, it is now at 7 seconds. So 7 seconds, our residents are barely opening the door when they look through that peephole. So that's the first place that customer service has to start, with that very first impact. So maintenance technicians, what do you look like in your residents' eyes when they look through that peephole? Remember, all they can see is, generally speaking, from about your chest to just above your head. That's also a reminder for us that when we knock on a resident's door, do yourself a favor and step back. My rule of thumb is roughly 2 feet, 2 sets of your feet. If you put toe to heel, 2 sets of those back from the welcome mat. That way, your resident gets to see more of you in the backdrop of the hallway if you're in an interior building, or the breezeway if you're in an exterior building. Don't crowd the door or crowd the peephole. Then, once you're standing in place, take a look at yourself. I know, I'm harsh on my own personal appearance. And I mean, I am not the best looking model quality. There are other maintenance technicians I've been around that are that, but is your hair brushed? Can your residents see your eyes? I know that's old school. Do you have a thingy in your ear? Because depending on what it is, those iPod antennae things that we wear in our ear that make us look like a Borg, that we listen to stuff, if it's there, take it out. That's a no-no. Be presentable. Can your resident actually see? Now, they won't be able to read your name tag, but do you have a name tag? Preferably with your picture on it. That at least can begin to reassure our residents that we are an employee of the property that we're working at. If you have a uniform shirt, is it clean? I'm not saying it needs to be pressed. I think that is maybe going a little bit too far, but at least it needs to be clean. No longer am I going to say that it needs to be tucked in because, for peephole view, it doesn't really matter much if it's tucked in. But remember, the goal here of knocking on a resident's door is to get them to open the door to us and for us. So that implies that we need to at least have our appearance be one of being pleasant right there as we're opening or as they open that door. So if your shirt is best tucked in, then tuck it in. If it's best not tucked in, I mean, there are some shirts that are made to not tuck it in. I've actually gotten comfortable wearing shirts now that are not tucked in, and it was a large cultural shift for me. What about your pants? When your resident opens that door after the peephole view, do they look like if you take them off, they're going to stand themselves up in the corner in order for the paint on them to dry? In the same way that curb appeal helps our residents to determine if they even want to come into the office, our peephole view helps residents to determine if they want to let us into their apartment. And yes, this does mean be very aware of what your appearance is, especially to our older residents in terms of tattoos. I know that's a dangerous topic, I know, and subject, but I bring it up. Our residents are going to let us into their homes. Our appearance matters. Oh, and one other thing. I have been around several maintenance technicians that wear their hair very, very long. My preference is to have short hair, but there was a time in my life where I had hair that was down to my shoulder blades. Yes, I am from the era of the mullet. I embrace it proudly. Today, long hair's making a comeback, both for men and women. The reason why I bring it up here is because there's a safety concern. If we go using power tools, it is easy for long hair, even if it's braided or not, it is easy for long hair to get caught in like a power drill or a Sawzall or some other tool. So there is a portion of this that is for safety as well as appearance and for our residents. Okay, so that's the first thing is peephole view. Be sure that we get that resident to open the door. And once they open the door, we are consistent, providing reassurance to our resident in our actions that we are competent to fix whatever their problem or issue is. And that brings me to the second point. Customer service for maintenance. We need to have an understanding that just showing up is not enough. I like to call it working presence. When I started or began speaking, there was an importance of matching the stage presence to the room. Early on in my career, I attended a class that has turned into the Advanced Instructional Facilitators class that the National Apartment Association Education Institute puts in place. I'm still a faculty member. And to this day, it is one of the most challenging speaking engagements I've ever done. And it was a training event. We happened to be, I flew out to San Diego and did this class in an association office. And during a part of the training at the time, we got split into two groups and we had an assignment of information that we had to present. And in my case, I had to present a 8-minute section on something. And I chose toilet repairs. So we're in this conference room. We're all seated around this table that fits 8. And there's probably 11 of us in the room. So in other words, there's myself presenting on one end of the table, and then there's 10 other people that are around the table. And one of those people around the table was Doug Chasik. And Doug, if you're watching this, I love you, man. And I'm so thankful that you were my instructor. I stood up in front of that group in the same way with the same intensity that I had just taught the previous week a CAMT class, which teaching a CAMT class with maintenance technicians, it's fast, I admit, it's loud, it is energetic, and I'm all over the place. And here we are in this small-ish room around a table made for 8, me standing at one end. And I went for it. I was all in how to repair the toilet and talked about the siphon and all of everything that went in. And my stage presence was kicked up to, on a scale of 1 to 10, I admit I was probably about a 38 on that intensity level and going. I got finished. I was focused on my outline. I was focused on what I was teaching. I was focused on what I was talking about. And I got finished, and there was a young lady at the other end of the table, and she was way back in her chair, and her eyes were big, and she sat there and didn't know what to say. You see, the exercise was you trained, and then the rest of the room gave you feedback. And it not only was in how to train, give content in a structured format, but the exercise was also in how to take critiques. So Doug Chasik looks to the young lady sitting next to her and then looks at me and he says, well, that was something. When you get to a stadium and teach, you're perfect. But remember, keep your training in the room. Match the intensity of the room. In other words, with how much energy I put into that moment, I could have filled up, in his words, the stadium. I've never forgotten that. And again, Doug, thank you so much. I love you for that frank feedback. To this day, I think that's a message our maintenance technicians need to hear. And to that end, when our maintenance technicians go into a resident's apartment, match your working presence with the room. And by that end, simple. A part of it is posture. You stand up straight. Do not go into that apartment until your resident says you may come in. That has the presence of politeness. If our resident answers the door and all we go is, "Hi, I'm here to work on your stove," and we just walk right in, I've seen it happen. That is nothing but rude. We're entering someone's home. Not only that, do yourself a favor. We're not even inside the apartment yet, and show respect for their apartment. I can't remember which leader it was throughout my career that showed me this, but he made a point of, before going into any resident's apartments, he would stop at the doorstep, whether there was a welcome mat down or not, and rub his feet. I picked that up. He pointed it out to me at that point in time. He says, look, I don't say anything to the resident, but even just doing that unconsciously says to the resident, I'm double checking the bottom of my feet to make sure they're clean before coming into your home. The booties, that's another topic, another day. We'll talk about that. But the presence you enter a resident's apartment with speaks of volumes. So, customer service, peephole view, and your working presence. How are you showing up with it? Those of you who are still with me and listening this far in, my question to you If you're an operator, if you are someone either in corporate or in a leadership role for our on-site maintenance technicians, have you had this conversation with your maintenance technicians? Whether you've had this conversation or not, my next question may be trouble, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Would you trust your maintenance technician to provide the customer service that you expect of yourself in front of a resident without you being present? If your answer to that question is no, then my next statement out of my mouth would be, are you ready to be the solution to that challenge? Because remember, as Charlotte Pashota said, a 2% increase in renewals is equivalent to a 10% savings in our budget. Thank you for spending your time with me today. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week, and I'll see you somewhere. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Maintenance Mindset. I hope you take away ideas that apply to your current and future career goals. Please check out Maintenance Mindset Minute to hear short-form, high-impact, applicable, maintenance-centered information. Whatever you do today, do it with a maintenance mindset. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, and subscribe. Visit multifamilymedianetwork.com to learn more about our other industry podcasts, thought pieces, and sponsorship opportunities. I'll see you somewhere.